Today I'm going to have you start out by doing the You Try It section after your notes. If you go to section 6.4, it's going to be the second page of 6.4, and we're going to add a couple of examples down to the bottom. Okay, the first one, add this to your notes down at the bottom. I would like you to factor x cubed minus 2x squared minus 9x plus 18. Now I'd like you to keep your flow chart handy. The very first thing you want to do is to factor out a GCF. After you do that, you want to decide what type of polynomial you have, and that's going to be based on the number of terms you have. You'll have a binomial, which is 2 terms, a trinomial, which is 3 terms, or a polynomial with 4 terms. So we go to this first questions and we see if we can pull anything out of all 4 of those. Well, this one does not have a GCF. So after we go to the GCF, again we go to the polynomial type, and we have 4 terms on this one. So we're going to factor by grouping. And grouping, remember, we did that with a trinomial. We turned it from 3 terms into 4 terms and then factored by grouping, looking at them 2 at a time. So let's go ahead and do that. With we already checked the GCF, so now we know that it's 4 terms. We're going to factor it by grouping. And when you group, you only want to look at the terms 2 at a time. So I look at these 2 terms and see what the GCF is, and the GCF here is going to be x squared. So I'm going to pull out the x squared, which is the same as dividing both of those terms by x squared. So I'm just going to write that under here so you can see x squared here, divide by x squared here. That leaves me with x squared, and then it's multiplied by, this is going to give me the x, and this is going to give me 2. Now if I multiply this back out again, or distribute, I should get what I have up here. We're just rewriting it. Now the next one, I can pull out a GCF, which would be negative 9, and you always want to take the sign with the number, so make sure you do that. When we pull out that negative 9, we're dividing this by negative 9 and this by negative 9. So that's going to leave me with x minus 2. After you do that, you're going to group again, and this should just be a review. They both have x minus 2 in common, so I'm going to pull the x minus 2 out, and I'm left with x squared minus 9. Now, you are not finished because this can be factored. So whenever you end up with your parentheses, always look back to your flow chart here, see if you can factor out a GCF. If you missed it the first time, you can catch it the second time. And then the polynomial type. Now this one is a binomial, and remember, perfect square factors into 2 terms times 2 terms, or binomial times a trinomial, or binomial times a binomial. We can't factor a sum of perfect squares, but we can factor a difference of perfect squares. And it shows you right here, and we went over some examples the other day how to factor. So what I'm going to do from here, I'm going to take the square root of this and the square root of this. And I mentioned a couple times that a lot of times people will just say that this factors into x minus 3. Those two are not equal. In order to have, when you factor, whatever your factors are, you should be able to multiply them together and get what you started with. So what we need to do is we need to add that x plus 3 next to that. When we alternate the signs, the middle term will go to 0. So my final answer is going to be x minus 2 for this factor here. And then when we factor this, it's going to be x minus 2, x plus 3. Now these are both to the first, or all to the first power, and we can't pull out any numbers out of here. So you have factored it as far as you can go. The second one that I want you to look at is 2x to the 5th minus 16x squared. Again, first thing you want to do is pull out a GCF. Well, we can see here these are both even, so I can pull out a 2. They also have x raised to the power, and the highest power that they have in common would be x squared. So my GCF is going to be 2x to the third, or sorry, it's 2x squared because that's the highest power here. So if we take this and we divide this by 2x squared, divide this by 2x squared, that's going to leave us with x cubed minus 8. And you should recognize that this is a binomial, but it's also a cubic binomial, and it's a difference of cubes. So when we go to our flowchart here, we have a binomial, and it is a perfect cube because we can take the cubed root of this and the cubed root of this. So remember, that's when perfect cubes factor into a binomial multiplied by a trinomial. So that means I'm going to have 2 blanks followed by 3 blanks. Now the first thing that we need to do is we need to figure out what numbers or what terms fill in the blank. So I'm going to take this x cubed and take the cubed root of it, so that's going to give me x. I'm going to take the cube, we're going to ignore the sign, just take the cubed root of 8, and that's going to give us 2. These are the only 2 things I'm going to fill in those 5 blanks with. So for this particular problem, A equals x and B equals 2. Okay, so we're going to use this and this, and when we go to the first set of parentheses, we raise them to the first power. So this is going to be x and 2. Second set of parentheses, and the 2 outside blanks, we raise them to the second power. So this is going to be x squared, and 2 to the second power, or 2 squared, is 4. The middle blank, we multiply a times b, or in this case, x times 2. So that's going to give us a 2x here. Then you just have to memorize the sign pattern. Since this was a difference of cubes, we take this sign, it's going to be the same. So same, opposite, always positive. And then you have your factored form. So I should be able to distribute the x, distribute the 2, and I should, oops, we need to bring this 2x squared down. That's why I put a box around it so I wouldn't forget it. 2x squared. And then that is your final answer. You want to list all the factors together. I should be able to distribute this into here and then multiply this binomial times the trinomial and get that expression back. Okay, so I would like you to do those 2 You Try It questions. There are some keys taped up on the wall that I'd like you to check it, and then we will do the top part of that on Friday.